Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about what you should study before starting medical coding school. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, I've been getting lots of messages from folks. Blue, I'm starting my medical coding program in the fall. Is there anything I should get a jump on now as far as like what to study? What should I go over? Yes, there are plenty of things. But I'm going to try to keep this very short on what you should study, because what you should study is going to be a lot. We have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. That's first and foremost. Secondly, you have to be able to comprehend and read this documentation, because you will be reading all day long. Reading this documentation, making sure that the documentation supports the diagnoses that are selected. And if not, of course, you're going to select the more appropriate diagnosis, the more appropriate procedure codes that are supported in the documentation. And the only way to do that is to understand what you're reading. Medical terminology is a completely different language. It is made up of Latin and Greek words. And I tell people all the time, if you devote time to learning medical terminology and anatomy, this will help you. Now, the fact that a lot of people struggle with this is beyond me, because there are so many helpful channels on YouTube alone when it comes to learning medical terminology and anatomy. Now, the other thing is, when we were kids in school, how did we learn? We learned our letters and we learned our numbers, and around the room, in every schoolroom, they had a border, right, with all the letters and all the numbers. And this was how we learn, by repetitively seeing this every single day. That's how we learned our ABCs, and that's how we learned our numbers. It is the same thing with medical terminology and anatomy. You can get posters from like Amazon. I will be leaving all of my affiliate links for everything that I recommend when it comes to anatomy and medical terminology in the description box below, guys. Please check out the description box. I get so many emails from people after the show. Blue, where can I find this? Where can I find that? Did you look in the description box? Because that's where it is. And the title will be there, so you don't even have to click on the link. You could just look at it and order from wherever you order your stuff from. But guys, do that. Look in the description box, and you'll see all of the links that I have for the anatomy poster pack. You can start by putting these around your study area, wherever you're studying. So this way you can see them on a constant basis. You can see them every day while you're pre-gaming to get to your study program. So this will help you. And I've been getting messages from people who are in programs now that say that they were so glad that they took medical terminology and anatomy before they took their medical coding course, because they see the other students that are struggling because they didn't do it. They thought that they could just wing it. And there are some instructors who have told their students, oh yeah, you don't need it. You can just learn it along the way. You will be learning medical terminology and anatomy, of course, along the way, but that is not an excuse to not give yourself a solid foundation of already knowing your basics. What are your bones? What are your muscles? What are the tendons? What are the organs? Those are basic things that you can learn. Now, again, we have to know all of these things, and you're going to be tested on a variety of subjects. It's not just one particular specialty. You're going to be tested on everything. So just make sure that you have a strong grasp. And I tell people, medical terminology is not as bad or as scary as you might think. All you have to do is learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. That's it. Then you can be able to piece together big, huge words all the time with ease once you learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Because when you do that, again, you're not having to memorize whole words. I see people get so frustrated and they tell me, well, Blue, I want to quit. And I say, okay, well, what's the problem? Medical terminology. Okay, well, what's the deal with that? Well, I'm supposed to memorize all these words? No, you're supposed to get into your mind those prefixes, suffixes, and root words. And when you do, you could piece those together like little puzzles. Okay, it's the same thing when you started learning how to spell. When you're learning how to spell, when you're learning how to read, what did you do? You use context clues. It's the same thing. These medical terminology words, they get pretty long. And so you can be able to put and piece these together. So that's something that you need to be aware of. It's only setting you up for success when you take the time to get to know this field that you're going to go into. You know, there's a lot of people that see, oh, well, I can do this from home and, you know, it pays really well. All of that aside, guys, if you don't understand what you're doing, you're not going to be in this industry very long. So working with your medical terminology, learning your anatomy, that's really going to help you. And take it one step at a time. Just go over it a little bit at a time. It doesn't have to take you just putting your whole self into it and then you don't, you know, contact people for days. Don't do that. Don't go for hours at a time, long stretches. You just need at least 1 hour at a time, and then take a break and then come back to it and maybe do 30 minutes and then come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. So work with flashcards. I tell people all the time to hand write out flashcards. Y'all don't want to listen because I get this resistance and it never fails every time. After the show, I will get a message from, oh, Blue, I don't want to write flashcards. Then don't. Then don't. If you don't want to write out flashcards, then don't. I'm telling you what made me successful. I've been a medical coder since 2008, and I've been a student since 2007. I know quite a bit. Now, do I know everything? No, but I know a lot, and I know more than your average bear. So the things that I did and the things that I do are the things that I'm sharing with you all. Writing out flashcards is a great way to start putting this stuff in your mind, because when you connect the mind and the body into a task, it remembers it and it creates that neural pathway more frequently to, you know, be able to recall these things. And so again, it's just setting you all up for success if you are starting to study your medical terminology and anatomy before you get into medical coding school. Now, medical coding is going to be typically in programs that are designed well. Medical coding is going to be at the end. You're typically going to learn about like medical law and ethics, and of course your anatomy and medical terminology first. You're going to learn about HIPAA. You're going to learn about like billing and things like that, like the different billing systems. You're going to learn about those things first, and then you're going to learn about coding. And then you're going to go, you know, learn about your diagnosis, and then learn your CPT, and then learn your E&M. There's a lot of things that you'll be learning after the fact. But to get through this, the boring part that people say, which is the medical terminology and anatomy, that's going to be the first thing that you're going to hit first. So that would be what I would recommend, is that you guys really focus on medical terminology and anatomy. And again, going through YouTube and just typing in, you know, anatomy, medical terminology, you'll see that there are a ton of really good videos. And you can even look at ones that are designed for nurses, because that's okay, because it helps to break it down in different ways as well. You don't have to get those books that say medical terminology for medical coders, because you know what that is? That is literally the exact same thing as all these other medical terminology books, right? Because all they did was just stick the name medical coder on there. Oh, okay, this is what I need. No, it can be any medical terminology book that you can get, okay? Medical terminology does not change, neither does anatomy. So even if you're working with older books when it comes to medical terminology and anatomy, it's totally fine, because it's still going to teach you the same thing that a new book would teach you. If you don't have a lot of money, if the library is open in your area, I know not every place has the libraries open now. Some places, you know, they were able to open after, you know, the bulk of the pandemic, and then others, they're still kind of doing a hybrid thing. If you can, if there's one there, check out a book on medical terminology and anatomy. That way you can start to get a feel of the field and what it is, and learning these things and working with these workbooks for medical terminology and anatomy, because it goes a long way to helping you. And when it comes to like flashcards, Barron's has a great set of flashcards, of course, for medical, not medical, but for anatomy, you know. So there's a lot of different publishers out there that have really great options for those. I recommend just looking on the internet. There's so many free resources on the internet when it comes to medical terminology and anatomy. You don't have to spend anything really, when you think about it, if you are resourceful. And it just starts with a simple Google search, guys. It is literally that easy. And again, when you listen to videos on YouTube, it's just like repetitively listening to it. Your brain is going to be like, okay, we remember this. So that is something that you can start to work on, those two things mostly. The other thing that I'm going to say is it's going to be a little over your head for a little while at least. But you can go to cms.gov and download the ICD-10 CM coding guidelines. Now, these are the things that we have to know. If you start off by reading these things once per week, it's like 100 and something pages, but that's just the way that it is online because of the font size. If you get it when you're looking in your diagnosis book, it's like 38 pages if you have the Optum 360 coding book. But all of the ICD-10 CM publishers put the guidelines in the book, at least most of them that I have seen. But these are the things that we have to know. These are our rules. So even though you haven't started studying the coding yet, if you get a jump on reading those coding guidelines and you read them frequently, it will make sense when you get into that portion. So if you start off by reading them once per week, you're going to be so fluent in those coding guidelines. It's a lot to read, so you can break it up over days. That is totally fine too. But start reading them so that way you know the rules. Those coding guidelines cover everything. They cover all of the rules when it comes to sequencing, when it comes to how certain codes apply and what codes don't apply, and what you should do if the patient has this condition or that condition. It covers everything. Now, if you know those coding guidelines forwards and backwards, no one can mess with you. And this is why I tell people to read them once per week. But still, I get those messages from folks, oh no, Blue, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. If you are able to spend hours online, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, if you're able to spend hours, and we know we are all guilty of this, scrolling through and looking at all of these things, you can spend hours, not all at one time, but just like 50 minutes or an hour at a time, reading coding guidelines. It's not going to hurt you, okay? So at least this way you can have an idea, you can have a strong grasp, especially when it comes to taking these exams. You know, if you're not having to sit there and think, because it's going to be like second nature to you, you're going to be able to go through these exams with a better speed than somebody who has not been doing this, okay? People who don't take the time to read these guidelines, who blow me off and say, oh no, you know, I'll be able to get it through and I'll be able to just pick whatever, and then, you know, they use encoders anyway. Encoders and AI and you know, all of these electronic medical records, it does not mean that the provider is selecting the correct diagnosis, and it does not mean that the encoder is actually giving you the correct code either. So if you know your anatomy, your medical terminology, and your medical coding guidelines, then you are good to go. That's what makes you a really good candidate, okay? A lot of people will ask me, is it possible to get a job if you have no experience? Hello? They are going to need medical coders to replace the coders that are retiring and the coders that leave the field. So if you get through and you get in, you know, out of your program and you pass your test, yes, obviously you're going to be able to find a job, but you have to be persistent, because this field it has a bad problem of these programs that rush people through and they make them ill prepared. Now, there are some really good programs, this is why I say 9 months, 12 months, or 18 months, that take the time to really develop the coder before sending them out, before sending them to take their exam, and then they're ready for the real world. The ones that are just kind of cattle herding people through these really fast medical coding programs, they're the ones that are out there, and then when the employer is giving them an assessment test to gauge their knowledge, they're not able to pass. This is why a lot of times new employers don't want to take a chance on new people. However, if you go in there prepared and you still apply anyway, even if they're asking for experience, if your resume looks good, and if you can show your competence when you're taking that assessment test, you are more likely to get taken a chance on than somebody who gets an assessment and then doesn't pass it, and then they just don't know what to do. It's about how you present yourself and your knowledge base. Medical terminology and anatomy is a huge part of this. If you look in the job listings for medical coders, it does say medical coder must be proficient in anatomy and medical terminology, because believe it or not, there's a lot of people who neglect this part. And it's not quality coding that's coming out of these folks, okay? So set yourself up for success. Be prepared and ready, and know, again, we have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. And it doesn't mean just because we don't have that medical school education that we can't elevate our game. I came from no background in medical at all. I didn't even know what medical coding was. And when I still went for it and I figured this stuff out later on, I was like, oh, I have to raise and elevate my game, because there's no way that I'm going to go to a doctor and say with a straight face, oh, well, you know, I didn't know that, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. No, it doesn't mean that you don't have to continue to study your specialty that you're in so that you can get better and more proficient, so that you can understand fully what the doctor is doing. That's just my advice anyway. But those are the 3 things that you need to learn: medical terminology, anatomy, and then your medical coding guidelines. At least start reading them. Okay, you don't have to understand them right now, but if you start reading them, it's going to be like second nature when you get to that portion of your program. My advice anyway. But best of luck if you are out there. Check through my videos, guys. I have a lot of independent study video tips on if you are learning this on your own, if you're going to a program, the things that you should learn. I also have medical terminology tips, how to learn them and things like that. So be sure to check that out. Go through the videos, guys, please, because those videos, I have over 800 videos, and there's a lot of them that are really good about these topics. I try to put the topics, you know, on the title. Check out the playlist. There's lots of playlists that are breaking things down for the modifiers. When I did the modifier series for Christmas in July. I'm not doing Christmas in July, so please don't ask me to do it. I'm not doing it. I'm also not doing Vlogmas this year either. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video was helpful for you, I hope you hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.